You have a phone full of unanswered messages from people you actually like. You go days, sometimes weeks, without feeling the need to talk to anyone. And when people ask if you're okay, you genuinely don't understand the question. You just spent 3 hours alone doing something you care about, and it was the best part of your week. But somewhere in the back of your head, there's this quiet voice that says, "Is this normal? Should I be more like other people? Am I missing something?" Here's what's actually going on. You are not someone who failed at being social and gave up. You are someone whose internal world is rich enough that the external world, most of the time, doesn't offer a better deal. And psychology has a lot to say about why some people are built this way, and why it's more functional than the world gives it credit for. Let's start with something most people get wrong. Being a lone wolf is not the same as being an introvert. Introversion is about energy. You get drained by social interaction and need alone time to recharge. That's one thing. What we're talking about is something deeper. It's about people whose default state is self-sufficient, who don't just recharge alone, they thrive alone, who aren't waiting for the alone time to end, who, when the weekend arrives with nothing scheduled, don't feel that restless pull toward other people. They feel settled. Psychologists studying what's called autotelic experience, the state of being completely absorbed in something for its own reward, find that some people access this state far more easily than others, and almost always alone. They sit down to work on something, hours disappear, and they come out the other side feeling more alive than they did going in. No one needed to see it. No one needed to validate it. The experience was complete by itself. If that sounds familiar, that's not a character flaw. That's a specific kind of mental architecture that's genuinely rare and genuinely valuable. Think about what your attention is like when you're alone versus when you're around people. When you're alone, you can follow a thought all the way to the end. You can start something and stay with it past the point where it gets interesting. You can sit with a problem until it opens up. Now think about what happens when someone walks into the room, or when your phone buzzes, or when you have to be somewhere. The thread breaks, and it takes time, sometimes a lot of time, to find it again. Lone wolves aren't unsociable. They're protective of the conditions that let them function at full capacity. Those conditions usually require quiet and solitude. The body signals this pretty clearly if you pay attention. Think about how you feel on a Sunday with nothing planned versus a Sunday with a full social calendar. Not tired, not sick, just available to your own day. There's a physical quality to that. The shoulders are lower, the breathing is different, the thinking is cleaner. Compare that to how you feel after a full day of being around people, even people you like. There's a specific kind of drain that has nothing to do with whether you enjoyed yourself. You had a good time and you're still depleted. That's not ingratitude. That's your nervous system telling you what it costs to run at that setting. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Lone wolves are often the most present people in the room when they choose to be in the room, because they're not there out of habit or obligation or a vague fear of missing out. They made a deliberate choice to show up. And when they're with someone they genuinely care about, they're actually there. Full attention. No part of them calculating an exit or waiting for it to be over. The people who get access to a lone wolf's time and focus are getting something most people hand out constantly and cheaply. It means something different when it comes from someone who usually keeps it for themselves. This shows up in how lone wolves do relationships too. They don't have many close friendships, but the ones they do have tend to be unusually deep. Not because they're trying to compensate for quantity with quality. It's just that when a lone wolf decides someone is worth investing in, they actually invest. They remember what you said 3 months ago. They think about your problems when you're not around. They show up when it matters in a way that's hard to find from people who are spread across 20 friendships simultaneously. The same is true in how they work. Most lone wolves have a capacity for sustained, uninterrupted focus that's becoming genuinely rare. The average person now struggles to hold attention on one thing for more than a few minutes before some social instinct pulls them toward their phone or toward other people. Lone wolves don't have that problem at the same level. Give them something worth doing, and they will disappear into it completely. That's not a quirk. In a world that increasingly rewards whoever can focus the longest and the deepest, that's a real advantage. The trouble is that the world doesn't frame it as an advantage. It frames it as a warning sign. The person who keeps declining invitations gets a welfare check. The person who genuinely prefers working alone gets sent to team-building exercises. The person who goes quiet for a week because they're deep in something gets asked if everything is okay at home. The world has decided that a certain amount of outward social activity is evidence of health, and anything below that threshold is evidence of a problem. And if you're a lone wolf, you've been living below that threshold your whole life and probably being subtly told about it since childhood. Now here's the honest part, because this kind of video can tip into flattery if you're not careful. There's a difference between being a genuine lone wolf and using solitude as a hiding place. A genuine lone wolf doesn't avoid people because people are threatening. They choose solitude because it's genuinely better for them than the alternative. They can be in a room full of people and be fine. They just prefer not to be. The hiding version looks the same from the outside, but feels different on the inside. If being around people feels genuinely dangerous, if the solitude is relief from something frightening rather than a return to something real, that's worth paying attention to. Not because it needs to be fixed immediately, but because knowing the difference is useful. For most people watching this, though, it's not the second thing. You know it's not. The solitude doesn't feel like hiding, it feels like home. And here's something else worth saying. Lone wolves are not cold people. This is probably the biggest misread, because the aloofness gets read as indifference, the quiet gets read as arrogance, the self-sufficiency gets read as not needing anyone. None of that is accurate. Lone wolves feel things deeply, often more deeply than the people around them. They just don't process those feelings outwardly, in real time, in company. They process them alone, at whatever hour the processing decides to happen, in the specific privacy of their own space. The emotions are all there, they're just not performed. And when someone earns their trust, really earns it, which takes longer than it does with most people, they get a version of that person that almost nobody else sees. Because the lone wolf in a relationship with someone they genuinely trust doesn't hold back. They're not playing it cool, they're fully in it. The selectivity that looks like coldness from the outside becomes complete openness on the inside for the specific people who made it past the gate. That's not a flaw in the design. That's actually the design working exactly as intended. And the thing you actually need to hear is this: you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you function. The world has a very loud opinion about what a healthy social life looks like. It involves a lot of people, a lot of showing up, a lot of filling the calendar. And if that's genuinely what fills someone up, that's real. But it's not the only real thing. The person who spends their Saturday alone working on something they care about and ends the day feeling genuinely satisfied is not doing life wrong. They're doing it in a way that works for them, which is the only version that actually counts. You already know this. You've known it for a long time. You just needed someone to say it without following it up with, "But you should really try to put yourself out there more." You shouldn't, not unless you want to.